Are you wanting to improve your expressive playing? You know that Chopin wrote a number of etudes, and one of them specifically, which was nicknamed Tristesse or sadness, the beginning and ending parts of it are all about how to get better expression on the piano. Even better, with this etude, those sections of it are easily within the reach of an intermediate pianist, and when approached properly, I think provide a fantastic technical study. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Hi, this is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anybody who loves piano, to share tips and ideas of how to get the best from this great hobby. If it is your first trip here, then please do consider subscribing. Simply hit the little icon in the bottom right hand corner of your screen now, and it's all done for you. Regular viewers know that I'm no great fan of technical exercises, and I do prefer to try to develop my technique from within actual music. And Chopin's etudes were built for this purpose. However, in general, you need to be a fairly advanced player before you can even really start to approach these. The beginning section, though, of Chopin's Etude No. 3 in E, Opus 10, is something that I've played since I was in my teens. I once heard it on the radio played by Maurizio Pollini and fell in love with it on the spot and decided to learn it. I did try to learn the middle part, but to be honest, it was so difficult for me that I just gave up. And in honesty, I thought that in actual fact, the etude, the study bit if you like, was only the middle section, and the beginning and end were just some kind of musical wrapper that Chopin put there to make it more pleasant. However, I was recently watching a masterclass on YouTube, and in fact, this masterclass lasted about 30 minutes, and almost all of it was devoted to this easy section with almost just a passing mention of the technical fireworks in the middle. At around the same time, I watched a video of Graham Fitch's, and I'm sure Graham can play all of these etudes blindfolded really, but he said that he'd experimented using Alfred Cortot's exercises and found that afterwards he'd got increased security in his playing of them. So I went over to IMSLP and downloaded the Opus 10 studies, the Cortot edition. And in fact, Cortot had developed a whole set of exercises, 9 or 10 of them, that were just for the beginning sections of this study. So I thought, it'll be interesting to see how much better I can make my playing of this by following these exercises. So I did. And given it's something that I think is, within the reach of many of us, I thought it would be worth sharing with you here. Now, whilst I'm sure you'd agree that the majority of Chopin's etudes are there to help us do tricky things quite fast, this one is a bit different, especially the beginning and ending sections. And Cortot points out that really what we're trying to develop here is quite different. In his view, this is all about learning to control polyphonics. It's learning to control rubato, it's learning to control the melodic use of the pedal as he puts it, and it's all about controlling the weight that we use within our hands whilst we're playing. Naturally, a lot of this is about legato, and he points out that it needs to be obtained in different ways. So of course there's finger legato, sometimes that we'll use by substituting a finger, but also it needs to be controlled by the use of the pedal and the sound, as sometimes we'll actually play melody notes with the same finger one after another. So basically we're talking about voicing on steroids. So in order to help us prepare our hands to actually start working on the piece itself, Cortot devised 9 different preparatory exercises, as he called them. Now, I'll be honest that I found some of these quite musically hard going and not that easy to do, but I also remember that when Graham Fitch was talking about them, he said that he thought that doing the exercises as Cortot recommends in every key, basically chromatically up the keyboard, was probably overkill. So inspired by this, what I decided to do was basically just do them over, say, an E major chord, a B major chord, and an F sharp minor chord, as these are the predominant harmonies within the piece. To help myself do this, I actually transcribed them. I thought that would be simpler, so I'll include those transcriptions with my downloadable practice notes, and the link to them is in the description below. I'm not going to go through every one of these exercises in this video, as really it'd be quite boring and I don't think it had that much value to you. So let me just demonstrate using exercises 6 and 7, and I'll show you how I approach them. Afterwards, you can quite simply apply the same principles to the rest of the exercises. Now, before we start, don't forget that I don't think Cortot ever intended us to try to play these exercises quickly. In fact, he's very precise in talking about measuring them by tone and by weight and by also lightness in the other fingers. So doing them slowly, I think, is a much better way of taking them. So the first way I went about practicing these was to in fact play the 16th notes with a staccato touch, whilst holding the quarter notes for their full duration and making them legato. Don't forget that whilst you're doing this, you need to focus on the quarter notes being played with a lot of weight, which is what Cortot says, and not attack, i.e. not pushing down quickly on the key, but pushing down heavily on the key. And then a second way to practice these exercises is to actually play everything legato, but of course keeping the quarter note for its entire duration and only playing the 16th notes for the appropriate duration, but joining them all together. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll probably find that some of these exercises are much more difficult than others. Now, exercise 6, for example, I found was not that difficult to try and play as I wanted it to be played. However, exercise 7, I still struggle with, to be honest, especially trying to get the weight in the second finger whilst playing the pinky lightly and without an accent. What in fact I did then was start to practice these exercises for just 5 or 10 minutes every day and work through them one at a time and try to do what Cortot was asking. However, whilst I do think it's important to do these preparatory, as Cortot calls them, exercises, I also think it's important that we start practicing the piece itself as well. And to do that, we actually go to exercise number 9. This exercise, as you can see, is actually based on the actual notes that we're going to play in the piece. In the edition I downloaded, the first couple of bars were sort of written out for us in 3 staves so we can see, but ultimately to work out how to do the same thing with the rest of the section is not that difficult to do. For me, the first step before actually embarking on exercise 9 though is to learn the notes and the fingering. I found that the fingering Cortot recommends is actually quite good. It's different than the fingering I'd instinctively used for all these years, but apart from 1 or 2 small places, it fits even my relatively small hands quite well. Give it a try for yourself and see how you find it. But whilst you do, don't forget that whilst this is a study in legato, you don't need to maintain legato in your fingers all the time. Now, sometimes Cortot shows finger substitutions that enable you to do this, and other times he actually plays the melody subsequently with the same finger. So clearly you can't join the sound in the fingers in the same way there. And of course you're using the pedal. So on that basis, if there's any of his fingering suggestions that to you feel sort of very awkward and contorted, use something else and don't try to maintain a strict finger legato. And don't forget, as Cortot points out, the point of legato is to make it in the sound, and that's where it really counts. So now we've done that, we're ready to have a look at exercise 9 itself. And Cortot's written it out, the first couple of measures of it anyway, and he's done it over 3 staves, so we can separate the different lines quite easily. And whilst doing this, pay particular attention to the fingering. Always make sure you're using the same fingering that you'll be using in the finished product. It's essential, of course, to make sure that the hand remains relaxed, otherwise we're sort of missing the point of doing it really. And I actually added a simplified left hand as well to this when I was practicing it. What I then opted to do was to, in parallel to exercise 9, practice the same 2 bars actually as written, but paying really careful attention to try to apply the same principles to the notes as I was applying to them and when used as an exercise. Now, of course, like anything where we're trying to build a technique, it takes time, doesn't it? It's not going to happen overnight, and you might not notice immediate improvements in your ability to voice this, but I'm sure you will over time notice that gradually it starts to improve. And I'm not saying I've got it perfectly yet, of course not, and I'm going to keep working on this for quite some time, but I do feel I play much better now than I used to play this in my teens. Now then, let's look at the next 2 bars. As I said earlier, Cortot's not written the exercise out for the entire piece, but you'll see that it's not too difficult to work it out. Of course, we start by making sure that we know which fingering we intend to use. As you'll see, if you do follow Cortot's suggested fingering, then at one point here we need to practice having the thumb jump between 2 notes. And of course, it's really important that we manage to get the thumb to move very lightly while still getting the volume and the weight into the melody note. Remember, in his words, what we're trying to do is split the hand into 2 halves almost, so that one half of the hand is playing with the weight to drive the singing tone of the melody, whilst the other is playing extremely lightly, but nonetheless extremely precisely. And then again, after we've done this for a few repetitions, just this couple of bars, go to actually playing it as written, but with the same concentration and focus on each individual finger movement. Now it's simply a case of rinse and repeat, really. What I do, and what I did in fact, was just work on a couple of bars at a time. So every day as my sort of 20-minute practice on this piece, I'd work on a couple of bars, I'd keep alternating between the exercise 9 way of playing them and playing them as they're written. Interestingly, I noticed that if I played any part of this without having first worked on the exercise 9 bit, I wasn't getting anything like the kind of separation between melody and accompaniment that I was looking for. And let's not forget, as this is a study, nothing is stopping us from working on it with the exercises and the as written part for an extended period of time. After all, some people who are 20 years into their piano journey do 10 minutes of scales regularly every day. Then, of course, to get the actual maximum benefit from this, you can start applying those same techniques and these same things in other pieces. So, for example, a really good one is Beethoven's Pathetic Sonata, where you've got the Adagio movement that's got a lot of similarities in terms of the way that it's written to this, and having the weight into the melody and the lightness into the accompaniment. And of course, pretty much all of Chopin's nocturnes rely on a bel canto melody that we can play in this way with weight in our fingers, while still having a very light and feathery accompaniment. I think this is a fantastic opportunity to be able to try to develop technique using beautiful music. And of course, one thing about this is that Chopin wrote this piece specifically for that reason. And it just so happens that it's exquisite as well. What a bonus. And to my mind, what's even better about this is Chopin did us a massive favour. If you look carefully, you can actually simply abridge the entire middle section, skip it completely, and go on to the ending quite easily without really losing anything from the beauty. And that means that until we're feeling brave enough to tackle the rest, we've still got something that we can play as a self-contained piece and that sounds gorgeous. And then when you are ready for the further challenge, you can start learning part of the middle section as well. I think it's even possible to learn some of the middle section and then abridge the very complicated, well, to me, very complicated bit towards the end, and still have something that sounds great. So I hope you enjoy learning this section of this gorgeous etude as much as I have. If you're not already, please do subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Don't forget to click the little bell icon so you're notified of new videos as and when they're released. I thank you very much for watching today, and I hope to see you very soon.